Did you know that 99% of all diseases start in the heart? So let me explain a little bit about that. It's not that you're going to get a heart attack or anything, but it affects us in so many different ways, and it starts to kind of manifest and to other things that the body holds on to it if it's not resolved. And so um, traumas, these traumas that we experience, if not dealt with, can grow in our body and cause impedances that might cause a disease. And so, because we're so emotionally connected, many doctors ignore or dismiss the importance of emotional traumas that are trapped in the body. So, today, we are with our what I call my brain whisperer, Dr. John Silva. He is back today to talk about neurofeedback and how neurofeedback, like last month, we talked about how neurofeedback can help with traumatic brain injury. This time, we're going to be talking about everyday life. It could be a childhood trauma or everyday perception of trauma that can affect our body and how it rewires our brain. So today, make sure you get a pencil, paper, because we're going to learn and grow together.
And when you need a friend, you can count on me. I'll be right here waiting for you.
Hi, my name is Lily McDermott, and I am a certified life coach, a certified holistic cancer coach, and the host of the Lillian McDermott radio show Classroom. If this is the first time you're tuning in, please know I've been waiting for you. This is a safe place where you can go when you need a friend. It is my commitment to provide natural ways to heal, and it is my mission to make awareness, responsibility, and truth a part of our everyday life. And I hope you, my listening, as well as my viewing friend, will feel empowered to embrace a new truth and live the life of your dreams. Well, as I said to you, 99% of all disease, and this is a quote from Dr. Lorraine Day, I love her dearly. But if you think deeply into it, we know that the DNA doesn't, our DNA is not the main culprit of our diseases. It can load the gun, but our lifestyle shoots the trigger. But let's talk about that emotional trauma and how it could potentially rewire the brain. And since our sole purpose in life to give and receive love and knowledge, I am so grateful that Dr. John Silva is here to do just that. Welcome to the classroom, Dr. Silva.
Thank you, Lily. It's great to be back.
It is absolutely. This is a topic that gets dismissed and overlooked by many physicians. So let's talk about emotional trauma and how it could potentially, especially when you're a child, you're a child, you're interpreting things a different way.
Mhm.
Um, how can it affect and rewire the brain so that it might not communicate as properly with your body?
Yeah, great point. And there's just so much to unravel there, but let's start with some basics. So last time, as you mentioned, we spoke about physical trauma to the head, brain, or anywhere in the body that would affect our brain function,
Mhm.
causing neuroinflammation, in unfortunate circumstances, different lesions and such. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what happens with that type of trauma is brainwave dysregulation. In other words, brain is not functioning in an optimized state that would be conducive to good cognitive well-being, emotional, behavioral well-being, as well as just overall bodily well-being. You have to remember, this is command central that rests between our ears, our brain. So it controls and regulates every physiological function at the cellular level from head to toe. Everything's masterfully coordinated and controlled by our brain. So it plays a critical role in every aspect of our life from birth until we pass. So yeah, trauma, physical trauma can influence how our brains function. So now we're going to discuss emotional trauma. And interestingly enough, from just a scientific standpoint in terms of affecting function, inflammation, and again, its dysregulation throughout the body, it has a very similar effect. It's quite fascinating. In fact, when I do what's called a quantitative EEG brain map, and we've discussed this in previous shows, it's a non-invasive type of EEG that maps out each region of the brain, and we're able to identify these dysregulated brainwave patterns. So brainwaves is how we measure brain function. And just again, touch on some basics here. So we may have come to learn about the different brainwaves that operate in our brain, like delta brainwaves and theta and alpha and beta and so on. And they all have a role in specific functions in our cognitive, emotional, behavioral well-being, as well as, again, regulating our entire body. But what happens is, again, because of traumas, both physical and emotional, these brain waves can go outside of their normal operating range. So think of your brain waves as much like your blood pressure or any other physiological function we can measure in the body. We know there should be an optimal range that would keep us healthy throughout our lifetime. However, if our blood pressure, for instance, gets too high or too low outside of that optimal range, we have a potential problem that may be diagnosed as such a problem, and then whatever appropriate interventions would be warranted. But we want to make sure that we maintain that optimal range, otherwise it can really affect us and shorten our lifespan. So our brains operate the same way. We can measure this ability to keep our brain waves in this normal operating range. So the reason I bring this up is on QEEG brain mapping, we can identify certain dysregulated brainwave patterns in different regions of the brain that can start to give us clues as to, again, not only why a person might be struggling with their emotional well-being or cognitive well-being, but also gives us a little bit of clue as to where and at what point or what causes may have caused their problems to manifest. Things like, again, physical injury or emotional trauma. And one of the things that's interesting is when we see a lot of elevated delta brainwave activity, and on the map, so you might recall from your map, that the elevation of
Yeah.
brainwaves or brainwaves operating too high is indicated by red and yellow colors. Much like looking at a weather map on the Weather Channel, they're going to indicate high pressures or high temperatures using warm colors like red and yellow and so on. We use the same thing in QEEG brain mapping, and what we typically see on a person's delta brainwave map is a lot of red and yellow. And sometimes we'll see it throughout the whole brain, not just one or two regions, but the whole brain just becomes what I call this brain on fire condition. So if you can imagine a picture of a top down view, look of your head and brain, that's
Yeah.
what we call a brain map, and the whole thing is just lit up this red and yellow, so it looks like a fire. And when we see that kind of a delta brain map pattern, that can be indicative of not only physical trauma to the head or brain at any point during that person's life, but also emotional trauma, because they have almost the same effect. Again, when it comes down to how our brains function, and particularly with delta brain waves. Of course, physical and emotional trauma can affect the other brain waves as well, but delta really gives us some clues as to what's going on. And why that's important is because we want to make sure that we are always getting to the root source. What causes this? It's one thing to provide interventions like neurofeedback, good wellness, sound wellness principles, dietary habits, and things of that nature, but it's always helpful, and this is just the realm of functional medicine, which is what I practice, but it's always helpful to try to address those causative factors, especially if they're still continuing to cause a person's problems or their chronic conditions. So we look at the brain maps as a way to help unravel the mystery of how a person got to that point in life.
Mm.
So emotional trauma has a huge influence again on brain function. And what's interesting is this can stem back to when, as you mentioned, way back to childhood.
Yeah.
Even before you started developing memories that you can now remember as an adult. In fact, oftentimes with emotional trauma as a child, our brains have a unique way or ability to kind of almost let us to forget that as a
Mhm.
survival mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
However, there's still remnants of that deep in our brain that we may not recall or remember, but is still affecting us from a physiological standpoint. And that's where people really struggle sometimes for a whole lifetime But of course, we do have the situations where people clearly remember the trauma
Mhm.
because perhaps it was so significant or so prolonged over the course of their childhood, maybe many weeks, months, even years. And that's unfortunate that I just think about it as a society and as a human race that we can get to that point where we would abuse or anyone of any age, but especially a child. And again, it may not just be abuse, but trauma comes in many different flavors.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can affect us and it can carry on throughout our entire life. So when we
I
think of
want to I want to
emotional trauma,
I
yes.
want to add something to what you're just saying because this could be trauma in the womb as well, which is
Hmm.
something that a lot of people do not even consider. And after doing work with Dr. Bradley Nelson and sitting in his conferences and learning more about the emotion code, the body code, and the belief code, and he's going to be on the show. He's coming back again. We've done a lot of classes with Dr. Bradley Nelson. But when you think about some of the traumas that we have, maybe inherited traumas that weren't
Hmm.
dealt with by our ancestors, our parents, or something, and being able to identify that this is not my trauma, this is their trauma, and kind of releasing it. When it comes to something like that, does it rewire the brain? Does it go to a particular region? Or is it different when you have PTSD, for example, from an experience? Does your QEEG show, like, it does tell you, oh, this is a traumatic brain injury, or this could be childhood trauma or an automobile accident? Because I remember that was something that I saw on my QEEG. Does it look different when it's emotional versus physical?
Sometimes we can pick out unique patterns that would give us, and it's never 100% certain either way. So that's why again, seeing this and then again, already having a complete good case history with somebody, or once we see this, we kind of delve into that a bit more, we can kind of unravel that mystery of what may have happened in that person's life. And here's the thing is it's not, sometimes it's a multitude of all of these traumas, physical and emotional.
Yeah.
And going back to the last time we spoke in our last classroom, again, we think of the significant head injuries like sports injuries, or we lose consciousness, or we're involved in a bad car accident,
Hmm.
we're knocked unconscious, we are bleeding, we're hospitalized. No, yeah, those are huge. Those can definitely impact your brain function almost immediately.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about oftentimes it's just the small, what we call micro traumas that we all experience. I mean, who hasn't gone to stand up in your kitchen and whacked your head on an open cabinet?
I just did today.
Did you? Okay. So, I mean, these kinds of things, our brain is so delicate to these small micro traumas that they just add up over time. And then add that on to the emotional traumas throughout our lifetime. It's just this recipe for functional disaster, if you want to call it that.
Mhm.
So, coming back to the QEEG, can we get that specific? Not that I'm aware of. Again, there might be some studies out there. But in the type of QEEG brain mapping that I do, we can get a good sense of where some of those causative factors that are or have come from, and then correlate that with a person's case history. And more importantly, let's introduce some interventions like neurofeedback, and
Mhm.
let's work on some of those causative factors, especially if they are still a continuing cause. I mean, I work with people who are unfortunately still in the midst of emotional trauma on a daily basis and have been for sometimes a lifetime.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not versed in counseling or therapy, so I'll refer out in those situations. But, a great combination is addressing it through traditional means, but at the
Hmm.
same time, getting your brain functioning better as a result of all this trauma through
Yes.
neurofeedback and other brain related interventions that you may not be necessarily being introduced to by traditional methods.
Yeah, when
Put
I
it
was
that way.
doing the neurofeedback with you, as we discussed in previous shows, especially with not the biofeedback, the delta theta,
Alpha theta training. Yeah.
alpha theta, emotions started coming out in me, and I reached out to my coach because everybody needs a coach, It's like
Yes.
even coaches need coaches, even doctors need doctors, and we need to understand one of the reasons why we created the Rewiring the Brain with neurofeedback training is for people to stop thinking about, if if you do need help, emotional help or whatever, that it is no fault of yours. It's no different than an electrical outlet needs an electrician. And so, what I've learned from Dr. Silva is that we are electrical beings, and these things do happen. And once in a while, there's a little short circuit in there that needs to be cleaned out, and that's what neurofeedback has done. And by the way, for those of you who missed the first neurofeedback training class that we did, we have another one coming up on April 29th, 2025. Everybody who registers before April 19th gets April 18th gets $20 off the cost. So you can get, I love a good deal. And this is worldwide. You can join us worldwide. So you may want to just ask Dr. Silva. This is an opportunity for you to listen to what he has to say, ask questions at the end, and so that you can decide, is this something I want to try? Is this something I don't want to try? Does it help, with your particular situation? And you can ask Dr. Silva. And that is April 29th, 2025 from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. If you cannot make that time because you don't live in Eastern time or you have an event, you can still send me some questions. And because we're going to be recording this, and everybody who purchased their seat in the webinar will be able to get a copy of the webinar so that you can listen to it over and over again. So I want to encourage you that if this is something you're curious about, this is a gentle way to learn more. And so we called it Rewiring the Brain with Neurofeedback Training 2.0, since this is our second class that we've done with Dr. Silva. So, there's a link if you go to whenyouneedafriend.com, and there's a link in the description below. Just click on it and it'll take you to that landing page so that you can learn a little bit more. So I'm really grateful to you, Dr. Silva, that you're taking the time to do something like this. I know the last time there's a lot of people that signed up, and I'd love to have them
Mhm.
come on the show to give us some updates on how they're doing.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I'm looking forward to our next upcoming event in April. A lot
Yes.
to learn, a lot to unpack, but I try to keep it simple. It's important to keep it that way because we can really dive deep into, especially when it comes to neuroscience and the brain. But I want to get it to a point in an organized fashion that we can relate to and actually show you visuals of what I'm trying to describe through a podcast such as this,
Yeah.
what a brain map looks like, and that thing. So definitely, those of you listening, it's well worth your time to come out and join us.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, I've got several people. In fact, it's interesting because most people that work with me are working with me for several months. It does take some time to
Mm-hmm.
rewire your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at like the end stages for a lot of the people who attended our class. That was what toward the end of October.
Yeah.
So they're coming to the completion and they've transformed their lives. It's the cool thing about this is I've got to know them. We've got to know each other well because we meet on a regular basis. We've got to know each other through the holidays, and some people had to take a little time off from their training. So we factor that in, but it's just so neat. In fact, just before our call, I had before we recorded this podcast, I was on a call with one of the clients that came from that last class or that last webinar,
Mm-hmm.
and she's doing so much better. And in fact, not to get into details or who that is, but it kind of relates to the topics of what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
A big impetus for her attending that webinar and then moving forward on doing the neurometric brain mapping and then talking to me about how we can potentially help her through neurofeedback, which she has experienced tremendous help. In fact, today's conversation was something that she never even could have imagined just several months ago. And
Mm-hmm.
she's got an extreme fear, which I work with a lot of people with different phobias and fears, and she has progressed so much. It's just quite amazing. It's awesome to be able to contribute to people's lives like that. And it's not me. Again, I'm just providing the tools, the resources, the know-how, providing the coaching, the guidance, looking after their brains as they're training, making sure we're moving in the right direction. But ultimately, it always comes back down to our body's innate ability through our brain again to be able to self-heal and self-regulate. And the brain is a very capable part of our body in doing just that.
Yeah, yeah. And I also want to share with everybody that we're going to be giving away one one seat for free. So if
Mhm.
money is an object for you, then this is something that you may want to text me at 407-373-5959 if you're overseas, because Dr. Silva can work with anybody around the world. And so you can email me at lily@whenyouneedafriend.com if you can't text me, and let me know that you would like a free seat and I'll put you in the winner's basket. And on the 17th, I am going to, draw a name. Actually, a week from today, I'm trying to figure out what date that is, but I will draw the name of the winner. And also for people who sign up for the event, because because of today's class, we're talking about emotional trauma. Because I found that it was good to consult with somebody as I am kind of like getting like clearing some of the things and rewiring the brain. I'm going to give away, as part of the people that show up, I'm going to give away one free coaching session with the person who, with the people that do sign up. I will offer a free coaching session for whoever that we get to win the winner's basket. So there's a lot going on that day. It's a Tuesday evening from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And again, it'll be recorded and you can still purchase your seat. This is something, actually, it's $49.95 is what it costs, but if $20 off is $29.95, that's less than what you would pay for a dinner. So just, consider joining us, sign up today. The link is below. So, Dr. Silva, as we talk about emotional trauma, and there's a lot of people that benefit from this. Can emotional trauma, can we lump PTSD? Will this help with people with PTSD and prolong trauma as well? How does it
Most
work?
definitely. Yeah,
Let's
most
talk about
definitely.
some about
So,
that.
yeah, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, so commonplace with so many people. And now, not the newest thing, but I'm hearing so many more people now being diagnosed with CPTSD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder. What it really comes down to, again, with any diagnosis, and I'm not knocking traditional allopathic medicine, but they're all about their diagnoses and they're very specific diagnoses, and there's reasons why, and I'm not going to get into that. But at the end of the day, what is going on in the brain that is causing that emotional, and how this all affects people, PTSD, complex PTSD, is it's affecting their emotional and behavioral states, their cognitive states as well, but mainly they're going to seek out help or treatment or therapy or counseling because of the emotional effects. They're anxious, perhaps panic stricken, they have phobias and fears, suffering depression, and most people that I see have expressed traits of both anxiety and depression at the same time. One is usually a little bit more than the other. And again, it's all wrapped up under the umbrella of PTSD or complex PTSD, but we need to really look at this. Again, see your therapist, do the counseling and the talk therapy. That's so vitally important. But we need to look at the brain as the ultimate cause of why your emotions are in this dysregulated state because of this trauma. And whether the trauma was recent or, like we mentioned earlier, it could go back to childhood. Okay. And here's the thing is, to some degree, if we want to use the diagnosis PTSD, virtually anyone in any modern society, the Western civilized nations, we all have some degree of PTSD. Just take the last, 4 or 5 years with the COVID pandemic,
Yeah.
geopolitical stressors, no matter how much you tune into this or try not to tune into it, it's basically a form of PTSD that we're all experiencing. And we all have our different coping mechanisms, but for some people, you can only cope for so much. You can only do so much on a conscious perspective.
Yeah.
This, on a subconscious level or unconscious level, is affecting your brain's physiology. And then that, again, manifests in poor emotional states, behavioral problems, you name it, sleeplessness, another common symptom of trauma.
Yeah.
So, again, coming back to the brain, this can start as early as childhood. And as you mentioned, it can be multi generational.
Yeah.
And I won't go into it now. Maybe we'll have to make a note to share my son's experience, which I usually do when I give my webinars or my speaking
You
engagements.
can you
I'll
can
usually
share
talk
at
about
any
my
time.
son.
Yeah, you can share
Yeah,
because this is what brought you to this new
it is.
passion of
Yeah,
yours. So you
yeah.
can share it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, how I really got into this type of work of offering neurofeedback therapy, brain-related disorders, is because of my son's experience when he was only 9 years old. He started developing ever worsening anxiety to the point where he was having regular panic attacks. And these panic attacks and this anxiety came out of virtually nowhere that at least my wife and I could relate to. But there's always an underlying reason why. And again, being a dad as a functional medicine practitioner, I'm trying to figure out what's going on here because he was otherwise up to that point a very healthy kid. We live a healthy lifestyle in our household. Comes from a loving household. He's did great in school, still does great. I mean, well, he's not in school anymore, but we just couldn't figure out where all this was coming from. So, make a long story short, a big portion of it was biochemical in nature because after doing some investigation and starting doing neurofeedback and getting him well, we had to address those causative factors. And by the way, his delta brain map, which is what a lot of what I just described was a brain on fire condition. And it just blew me away. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's the source of his anxiety and panic, but also gave me some additional clues to start going upstream, as I like to call it, to figure out, all right, what do we need to address here so this doesn't happen again and we can truly get him recovered and healed. So what we end up finding out is something that I kind of thought we were dealing with a mold issue in our house. And again, I think we've touched on this, and this could be a whole other topic. In fact, we should probably do that for a future podcast. But our classroom is mold is very very toxic to the human body. Some people are more susceptible or more sensitive to it, but especially it's a neurotoxin, and it really affected my son. Um, Causing this anxiety, panic, and obsessive compulsive traits. So we dealt with the mold, but what I also discovered in this journey of looking at causative factors is my wife and I really felt part of this was in the womb. So when my wife was pregnant with our son, she had been flying. She flew for Delta Airlines as a flight attendant, and she was en route to Cincinnati, Ohio, at the time of the 9/11 tower incidents. So their flight, as with all flights nationwide, were immediately grounded in the nearest closest airport. And she just recalls, I mean, that whole week being put up in a hotel room, sharing rooms with other flight attendants from her crew, just the repeated news. We all went through that same thing, the news cycle, just 24/7, just repeated, repeated. And of course, she was nowhere near the incident. It didn't affect her directly, but she was part of that industry. She was in the air at that time, and you start thinking of all those things. I mean, we're blessed that it didn't affect
Yeah, it
us
could have
that
happened to
directly.
her. She could
But
have been in
yeah,
that
yeah.
plane. I mean, yeah, all of us went through that.
So and she suffered some PTSD at that time. Now at that time, I had just started my practice. I wasn't doing this kind of work with the brain related stuff. So she actually sought some help with a therapist, and she had an evaluation with a neuropsychologist at that time, and she was able to manage to get through it. She took some time off from work. In fact, that time off of work turned into a leave that Delta offered right after we had our son. So she had
So she was
the
pregnant at the time.
yeah, she was one. She
So,
was
so
flying. Yeah.
that, okay, so that
So
trauma, that emotional trauma that she experienced carried on to her son,
yes,
and that could have triggered something, could have triggered that fear. And, as a child, you
yeah,
don't know where it's coming from, so it must be this or it must be
yeah.
that. Yeah.
And there's science to support this. Again, at that time, never even thought about that. I mean, we're just, of course, you're concerned for the basic safety and health of your developing child in the womb. And it was a natural childbirth. He came out and he's been a healthy kid ever since that time, but never started to realize. And again, even the science back then probably wasn't where it's at now to show how this can be generational and can be passed down through the womb. So that was a big part of it. Again, the mold was the big initiating factor, but it's just interesting when you look back, and that's the whole premise. And what I love about functional medicine practice or holistic medicine is we never stop looking at the causative factors. That's so important, so vital when you're trying to really help someone recover long term. Unfortunately, so much of our traditional allopathic medical system never looks at the causes. It's just here. Take a pill, do an intervention. Let's palliate your symptoms until your next dose or until the next time I see you. Never exploring what
Yeah.
can we do in your daily life? What can we look at your stressors? Can we try to fix something? It's such a shame.
But
And people are walking
unfortunately,
around.
that pill will cause another symptom,
Hmm.
and that other symptoms get treated with another pill. And before you know it, they're taking so much medication that it's never been tested together. So we don't know what kind of other side effects. It's called a poly pill. I remember there was the concept of a poly pill, that they would put all the different pills in one pill so that they wouldn't have multiple pills, but it was still the same thing, multiple pills. And it's so funny. It's like they come up with a new concept. Oh, now all you have to do is take one pill because we're too lazy to take five, or
Yeah,
we're too lazy to do whatever. And so I immediately got rid of that. This was at the beginning of my marketing career. That was
yeah,
like, wow, you don't have to take five pills. You could just take one, and all the five pills are in there. Listen, there are side effects to everything that's not natural. Even natural sometimes, I'm allergic to wheat, I'm allergic to dairy. One would consider that natural, but all the chemicals that they put in the wheat and all the chemicals you put in the dairy are not natural. And
yeah.
so we gotta be our own MD, our own medical detective, and dig, dig, dig until there's only truth. And that's what I love about the simplicity of neurofeedback and how easy it is, the privacy of your own home, to share how you can hook up some of the monitors, Dr. Silva.
Yeah, so much of what I've been doing the last several years is home-based neurofeedback because the technology is advanced just as with any other sector of healthcare or medicine. So it's evolved to where you don't necessarily have to go to a neurofeedback clinic like I used to have back in the day, traditional brick and mortar practice. So I ship out home-based neurofeedback equipment. It's very simple to use. It consists of either a tablet or a laptop computer with proprietary software. You have some sensors that attach to your earlobes and onto your scalp. And these sensors, I always have to preface this, these aren't emitting any electricity. There's nothing invasive. These are simply sensors that are reading, monitoring, and detecting your brain waves in real time. That information is conveyed into specialized hardware into your computer. And then the software provides your brain feedback to better self-regulate. So we were talking about the brain on fire condition with all this overactivation or elevated delta brain waves. What we're doing through each neurofeedback session is we're teaching your brain to better self-regulate and bring down all that elevated delta brain waves. It takes some time. As I mentioned, I'm working with some of the people from that last webinar, and they're just coming to the completion of doing this training process. And it's been simple for them. They're doing it from the convenience of their home. I'm working with someone from New Jersey, someone from the UK,
England, yeah.
Tennessee. So it's so
Hmm.
cool. And again, we meet on a regular basis, but they are doing their neurofeedback sessions from home,
Yeah.
usually 3 to 4 times a week. I get to monitor their sessions either in real time, which is so neat. So through cloud-based technology, I can pull up my laptop or my tablet, and I can see their brain waves in real time as they're 1,000 miles away doing their brain therapy sessions. If I
Amazing.
can't witness it in real time, I get a recording that I review on a regular basis to see how their brains are functioning. In fact, you and I on some of our calls together, as you were going through this process of
Yeah.
neurofeedback last year, I share with you some of the data points and some of the graphs that show you
Yeah.
how your brain is performing, how it's evolving, and how it's improving. It's so neat. And I try to keep it simple. Again, there's a lot of complexity, and there's stuff that I still am learning when you get into the nitty gritty detail of all these metrics and all these data points, and it's
Yeah.
quite fascinating.
Are
But
they
at the
going
end of the
to?
day, I try to keep it simple and help people through this process. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so that's neurofeedback in a nutshell. And again, it's a non-invasive way to kind of rewire your brain waves into normal operating state, overcome the effects of this trauma. And I've worked with people that have had, again, lifelong struggle, many traumas, whether significant one-time events or multiple repeated events like abuse, whether it's a spouse and spousal abuse or child abuse. I mean, just when I thought I've seen the worst, I don't like to call people cases, but when I've taken a thorough history and I've talked to someone about their experiences throughout their lifetime, just when I thought that I heard the making of what could be a whole series of a drama. I hear the next person comes in is like, oh my gosh, how did you even survive through all this?
Mhm,
It is
mhm.
quite amazing some of the things that you hear and what people. And that's the wonderful thing about us as human beings. We are quite resilient. However, we do pay a price, and it affects our health at the end of the day. It still affects
Yeah,
our health, but it's amazing how people can still manage to get up every day and live their life, albeit not very healthfully, but there are solutions, and neurofeedback is that great solution.
it
So
is. It
yeah,
is.
it's quite amazing some of the stuff I hear. So this is very, very applicable for first responders. I mean, these people see some stuff that, I mean, most of us would not ever want to see, or if we do see it, it's usually in a fictional setting through a movie or something. But these
Yeah,
people see the stuff real time, real life events. I work with military, ex-military, law enforcement, and again, just the person out there who has had trauma throughout their lifetime. And again, I think we touched on this before, but just to reiterate, it's not just those big emotional events. For
yes.
the rest of us, it's the day-to-day stressors, okay,
Yeah.
that just bio, what I call bio accumulate.
And
It just keep,
perceived trauma,
yeah,
perceived trauma.
and
Like
yeah,
somebody
exactly.
cuts you off on the street, to me is like no big deal, but someone else, it's like road rage, you know?
Yep, yep, yep. It becomes this kind of vicious cycle. And just to throw in a little bit of factoid or some scientific stuff into this, so there's a deeper part of our brain, a very small part of our brain called the amygdala. So if you really want to, again, this was a great thing about technology nowadays. Just go on Google, do a search, and you'll get a whole AI overview. But there's a little tiny part of our brain and part of our temporal lobes, essentially, that have a crucial role in processing our emotions, particularly as it relates to fear, anxiety. And it's this part of our brain that really kind of houses, if you want to call it that, physiologically, that trauma, whether it's again, the day-to-day stressors or the big emotional events in our life. That little part of our brain, it's about almond shaped and almond sized. It's a small part of our brain, but the things that can manifest in its connection to the rest of our brain through our temporal lobes and these complex neural networks, it's amazing how this little part can do such damage for us in causing depression and anxiety and fears and phobias. So what interesting is, again, knowing this neuroscience, and again, you'll probably never hear this from your doctors, but this is, I mean, this is well established science, has been for a long time. But what's really, really neat is for those people who have these traumas, this PTSD, this complex PTSD. I have been trained through my postgraduate training over the years doing a specific type of neurofeedback specifically related to trauma, to PTSD, to the fear, the anxiety, the depression that results from that. And part of what this neurofeedback is doing is targeting that deeper recess in our brain called the amygdala. It's quite fascinating how quickly people respond. And I've even seen situations where just in a matter of a few neurofeedback sessions, they start to integrate this trauma
Mhm.
relatively quickly. And I've had people tell me that what we accomplished in just a couple of neurofeedback sessions, they couldn't even do in years of
Yeah,
talk therapy or counseling.
yeah.
And here's the reason why. It's nothing, again, no magic abilities on mine. It's just this again, the scientific approach to this whole process through the ability through neurofeedback. We're getting to the root source of the problem. And it's, yeah, it's quite amazing. In fact, again, I was just talking to someone today with a phobia. And when we started doing this specific type of trauma neurofeedback, sure enough, for about 3 to 4 sessions, after her session, she would have an emotional response. She just started crying, couldn't even tell you why. I mean, it soon resolved. And I told her, and I prefaced her sessions before we started these trauma based neurofeedback sessions. I told her, I said, not everybody, but on occasion, I may get someone who experiences what I call integration. Their brain is going through this healing process. And sometimes they may have an emotional response. If it doesn't happen during the actual neurofeedback session,
It's
it may
cool.
happen a few hours later, or where it commonly will manifest is in nighttime. You may have some vivid dreams, perhaps some night terrors related to a trauma. If you do remember that dream, it may be related to that trauma. But what's really neat about this is like ripping off a band-aid once and for all.
Hmm.
If, as long as the person's comfortable with doing it, we never push anyone through. I never want someone to be so uncomfortable
Hmm.
with this integration process. And in my whole career of doing this, I've only had one person, and this is a person with a lot of lifetime trauma, that we had to just put a pause to that specific type of neurofeedback for about a week, let her recover from
Process it.
this healing cycle, as we
Yeah.
call it, natural healing, and she was able to easily resume. And at the end of the day, I mean, from a physiological standpoint, we're able to rewire her brain out of the effects of that trauma throughout her lifetime.
That's
So
wonderful.
it's
That's
powerful stuff. It really
That's
is.
wonderful. And if
Yeah.
you want to be a part of our next Rewiring the Brain with Neurofeedback Training 2.0 with Dr. John Silva, please, please, please click the link below to do some research of your own. There's a $20 off for the cost if you sign up before the 18th of April. And that way you can enjoy, because I love a good deal, attending it for $29.95 as opposed to $49.95. And that $20 can help towards just about anything in your life. So if you decide that you want to get your seat ready, I will invest in you. And we're going to be doing some giveaways. So please make sure you text 407-373-5959 or email me at lily@whenyouneedafriend.com. We're going to be giving one seat away. That way, you're able, if money is the reason why you can't make it, then you'll have no excuse. It's time to change your life. And that's what we really promote here at whenyouneedafriend.com in the Lillian McDermott radio show classroom, is that we take ownership for our life. Yes, we can say that somebody caused us this pain, or you can say, it's despite of that incident, I'm still going to live a happy life. But how do I do it? This is a great place to start. At whenyouneedafriend.com, we take 100% responsibility for our life. Go to whenyouneedafriend.com. While you're there, please subscribe if you haven't done this, because if you are a subscriber, you already have all of Dr. John's information. You also have the Neurofeedback Training 2.0, the course, the Rewiring the Brain. You'll have that on in the website, in the blog that you get every Sunday. You get a blog letting you know who's going to be in the classroom, what classes you want to see. You can link up to it and everything. So while you're there, also please make sure that you like and follow me on all social media. Make comments, make emojis, anything that you can do to create movement in this particular class, even sharing this video with your friends. That way, the algorithms cannot garble this information. This is information that there's a lot of companies that don't want you to know this, because it really is that amazing. And what if you would have to get off your medications? What if you wouldn't have to do the things that you were doing before that is feeding somebody else for their yacht or whatever it is that they're getting. And so I just want to encourage you to stop whatever you're doing, look into this, and then share this video with your friends, because you may want to do this with your family. You may want to do this with your friends. And also, I just wanted to let you know that you can check out my Shop Now bag. And in my Shop Now bag, these are Lilly approved products that are synthetic free, or the help with pain management. There's so many different things that you can, reach out to, learn about, so that your body doesn't have to go through as much chemicals as there are out there. Also, check out my sponsors, support them like they're supporting the classroom. And last but not least, you can become an enrolled student in the classroom, whether it's $1 or $1,000 a month, a one-time donation, whatever the case may be. Just whether it's your time, your talent, your treasure, all of it is so much appreciated. And so today we have Dr. John Silva in the classroom, and he is just, I call him my brain whisperer. I love what he's doing. I've heard so much great feedback on neurofeedback, especially with Dr. John Silva. You can reach him if you can see all his information on his screen, but right here, you can find him at drjohnsilva.com. His number is 772-494-2576. Just an amazing way, classically trained as a chiropractor, and you have the neurology, functional neurology background as well. But this just fills in all those little gaps that those different clinics or doctors may not have. And I love how neurofeedback kind of like fills in those blank spots of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. And coming back to next month to the event coming up here shortly. As last time, I think we agreed we're going to have some giveaways. So
Oh,
definitely
yes.
well worth your attendance.
Yes.
We like
And
to
those
make this fun,
giveaways
and
are
you're going
worth
to have some resources.
$200, right? They're worth
Yeah.
almost $200.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're giving away two of those?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
what is it called again?
So an opportunity for a neurometric brain mapping assessment. Yep. All done
Yes.
from the convenience of home. And I've actually added more resources to the report. So it's a multi-page report. It'll show you clearly define what's going on in your brain, or if this is for your family. But what I'd like to do this time around is provide it's just a sample report. Just somebody from my database will obviously redact any names and personal information. But the reason I want to do that is, again, visually we can see what's going on. But also I've added some new pages to this that have some digital resources that you can click. They're clickable links to
Yeah.
short form videos on YouTube, explaining some of the things that we've talked about on these
Hmm.
podcasts
Yeah.
over the last almost a year now. Things like neuroplasticity, how emotions are derived from our brain, how our brains function. So yeah, all stuff that I'd like to give out. And you know, whenever I do these types of podcasts, or I've done live speaking engagements here in my local community over the years, I always like to have people with some walkaways. And of course, in today's digital world, the walkaways are in digital format. But here's something for everybody as a resource. Again, I like to provide resources whenever possible. So a great, wonderful book, which I think we've mentioned on a previous podcast, is a book you can pick up on Amazon. I'm looking at it right now. It's only $10.86 for the actual paper copy, or you can get it as an Audible audiobook. But it is called "The Body Keeps the Score," and the subtitle is "Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma." Great book, especially for anybody that has trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD, or whether you suspect that you have ill effect of brain function because of trauma, or even if you just want to explore more about the role of your brain or your child's brain or anyone, a loved one, and its effect on our emotion and our behavioral well-being. It's by author Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. He's a medical doctor, traditionally trained medical doctor. Wonderful book. Anyone who I've ever met that have discovered, and so many people have discovered neurofeedback because of this book. And this book was published, I think, just about 11 years ago. Yeah, actually 2015. So 10 years ago. And so many people have discovered neurofeedback as a result of this book, because Dr. Van der Kolk dedicates a whole chapter on his application. And he's been doing neurofeedback much longer than I have. He's one of the pioneers in our field, and how he uses or has used neurofeedback as part of helping people recover from trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD. So great listen in, great book. Check it out, give it as a gift to anyone that you might know. Maybe this is not applicable for you, but maybe you're listening and you know someone that's suffering with, again, anxiety, PTSD, depression, whether trauma related or not. This is still an exceptional read. So I like to provide resources whenever possible. So that's a great resource. Yeah. So it's again, coming back to this PTSD, this trauma. Again, could be the significant events, could be the daily things that we discussed. Just the takeaway for today is you need to look at your brain. And again, if it's
Yes.
on behalf of a loved one, have their brains looked at in terms of function. Again, when I say have your brain looked at, you may go get a CT scan or MRI, and oftentimes, especially when it relates to emotional trauma or PTSD, typically you're not going to see something show up.
No.
You need to look at your brain from a functional standpoint. And that's where neurometric brain mapping, that we'll be discussing when we do our event here shortly. Also, QEEG brain mapping, there's other diagnostics out there that allow us to look at the function of our brain. This is not QEEG isn't the only game in town. You can invest a bit more money, several $1,000s, for things like SPECT scan or functional MRI. And again, there's a time and place for all of these things. But for the rest of us that maybe don't have several $1,000s out of pocket, because most insurance companies don't pay for this kind of stuff unless it's absolutely warranted, then QEEG, which is kind of older than any of these things and has existed for a long time, is a very affordable
Yeah.
approach.
Yeah. And I
So,
also want
and
to add people with addictions because people
mhm.
sometimes have addictive personalities. How can neurofeedback training help with addictions and addicted personalities? Because
Yeah,
that's part of it. Speaking of emotional
mhm.
traumas, that could be the root cause, but how does it rewire the brain?
Yeah, a great question. And I've worked with many people with varying addictions, whether it's online porn, substances, gambling, you name it. And again, this all can be explained by the different regions of our brain and what parts of our brain, and is that part of our brain in this dysregulated state that would cause that obsessive trait. It basically comes down to an obsession, an obsessive compulsive act on, and that's where that addiction comes through. So at the end of the day, again, it's looking at from the perspective of your brain and brain function in these different regions, seeing that, hey, there's an imbalance there. There's dysregulation of certain brain waves in that region or those regions of the brain that would then manifest in this obsession, these obsessive compulsive traits, and or the addiction. I mean, they're all kind of lumped into one thing. But yes, they can be helped tremendously with neurofeedback. In fact,
Yeah.
there's even some groups out there within our space of neurofeedback that do nothing but provide specialized services for people with addictions,
Hmm.
even specific addictions. So it's quite amazing. And again, just like with the trauma I mentioned, there's specific types of neurofeedbacks, particularly for that part of our brain, as I mentioned, called the amygdala, to help integrate or overcome the physiological effect, the unwiring of our brain because of the trauma. And we can
Yes.
actually repair those neural circuits and rewire them, as you usually will say.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, many people keep themselves from learning something different and new because they have a conception of, oh, this is going to be too expensive. Because if you're thinking about going to a clinic and having going to therapy and going to, and you know how much that costs, that could be very expensive. Sometimes insurance doesn't pay for it. But when it comes to neurofeedback at the home, would you
Mhm.
say it's cheaper to do neurofeedback in the home than to have your insurance pay for office visit for a doctor? How does that work out?
Yes, yeah, it always is going to be less costly, expensive. Yes, yeah. At the end of the day, most definitely. And then you know the old adage, you probably heard this before, is you pay now. Yes, there will be some investment, but I do keep my fees very, very affordable, especially in comparison to traditional methods,
Mhm,
and especially the fact that this is actually fixing something.
mhm.
And that's the great thing about neurofeedback. This is a long-term permanent solution for most people. Okay. So when we do a course of neurofeedback sessions over 3, 4, 5 months, which is the average for most people, we're talking rewiring your brain into a healthier state. Once you've done that process, you've gone through that process, you've trained your brain for long lasting relief. Now, God forbid you have a head injury or
Step
another
back.
emotional trauma that
Hmm.
could cause some unraveling of those neural networks. You know, I always tell people when they're exiting my neurofeedback programs, God forbid one of those circumstances should occur, whether you think you're having any struggles or symptoms or not, call on me. Let's set up a consult. Let's determine whether or not we need to do a brain mapping of any sort. Let's do it. And it's interesting, the few people I've ever had come back to me because of one of those circumstances, what's really fascinating is you put them on neurofeedback. It's all it usually takes is several weeks, and their brain kind of resets itself
That's
back to where
great.
they left off
Yeah,
after their neurofeedback sessions.
yeah,
It is
yeah,
quite fascinating how our brains work, and that's the cool thing about this. So the old adage is you pay now or pay later. I'd
yeah.
much rather invest in myself now. But to do a comparison, home-based neurofeedback to clinical-based neurofeedback, this is not only convenient, you're doing it from home with the same great outcomes, but it actually, when you cost factor it out, it's usually more than half the cost of doing it in a clinic,
Mhm.
which is really, really cool. And
That's
that's what I love
that's
about technology.
you
No
know
matter what
me.
industry, no
I
matter
like
where we're at, yeah,
I like a good
technology
deal. Yeah.
is making it more accessible, more affordable. and helping more people. So yeah, and I always will discuss costs with people, and some people's insurances do cover it, not always. I don't direct bill any insurance. I'll always provide
But they
any
can do it. Yeah, they can
receipts
do
that
it.
they can
Yeah.
self-submit, and sometimes people's insurance companies will pay for it. But at the end of the day, it's so affordable,
And
especially with the results that you will get from this.
yeah,
Yeah,
and my perspective is don't let your insurance dictate where you
yeah.
go for your own health. And with that in mind, I just want to encourage you once again, Rewiring the Brain with Neurofeedback Training 2.0 is going to be on Tuesday, April 29th from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be recorded. Anyone from all over the world can be a part of this. If you sign up before April 18th, I believe is what I'm looking at here. I thought it was 19th, but I think it's 18th. Then if you sign up before then, you'll get $20 off. So you go from $49.95, which is how much it cost last time, to $20 off, $29.95. And I hope that that is going to be affordable to all of you that are out there. And you know me, I love a good deal. But once the 18th has come and gone, then it goes back to that price, even though that price is still a very good price. I don't want money to be an issue. And if money is an issue, we're giving away one seat for the event. So you can text me at 407-373-5959, or you can email me at lily@whenyouneedafriend.com. Just let me know that you would like to be entered into the winner's basket for the free seat for the neurofeedback training, and we will put you in. And before the 16th or 17th, so that if you decide you want to purchase it at a lower cost, you can decide to do it at that point. But we will pick some names and hopefully it'll be you. Final words, Dr. Silva, before we go.
Final words, yeah. So again, remember that we're all to some degree affected by emotional trauma on a daily basis. We all have some degree of PTSD, to use a medical diagnosis. So get your brains checked. If you have a loved one that you know definitely has been diagnosed with PTSD, have them get their brain checked through some type of functional assessment. Reach out to me. You have my contact information. Attend the webinar coming up here shortly, gather some resources from that, have the opportunity to have one of these assessments. And we'll be talking in greater detail. And again, I'll show you examples of an actual person's brain maps, neurometric brain maps, and it's well worth the investment of looking into this, whether it's your time to attend the webinar or just reaching out to me even before then on behalf of
Absolutely.
yourself or your child.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And I want to add to what you're just saying. Even if you don't have trauma, even if you don't have, whether it's brain or emotional, and you just want to be a better you, whether it's an executive, a mom, a dad, a friend, or an athlete, this is also for everybody, including people who want to improve where they're at currently. So just
yeah.
so I wanted to end with that. And thank you so much, Dr. Silva, for everything that you do. I'm looking forward to our next training session, our 2.0, Rewiring the Brain, and learning and growing with one another. So thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
And remember, you can always get a hold of Dr. Silva. Oh, and by the way, if you want to speak to Dr. Silva, everybody's going to get like for people who join, are going to get a time with Dr. Silva with a consult as well. But if you can't wait till then, text me and I will see if I can get you in sooner. And please remember, we'll be right here waiting for you worldwide at whenyouneedafriend.com. This is Lily McDermott and Dr. John Silva wishing you love, peace, joy, and unexpected abundance. Make it the best day ever. Good job. Good job. That ever is getting better than ever.
The opinions and advice expressed on the Lillian McDermott radio show are intended for the individual callers and guests on the program and are presented to our wider audience solely for general educational purposes. Please act responsibly and consult personally with your own medical, psychological, or nutritional expert before taking any steps to improve your life.